Today's podcast episode is inspired by Nathaniel Drew's 7-month-old video on what he wished he knew about not going to college. As you know, I'm an artist, probably like you listening, but I never went to art school or college. I'm not sure if you knew that. In fact, the question faced me one too many times, and I felt sick to the stomach with the idea of attending a further institute school. Now, I know you may not know who I am, and I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Sanjana, and on this podcast, I share how my mindset has been shaped and changed by my journey learning art. But before we get into the podcast, I'd like to put a disclaimer. I'm not telling you to not go to art school or any further learning institute, and neither am I in a privileged position to have made that decision myself. It is quite the opposite. But what I am sharing in this podcast is my own experience, and also my own thoughts inspired by a video I watched, and also I hope to give those who haven't made this decision yet on more clarity on what to expect, both good and bad. So without further ado, mesdames and gentlemen, let's get into the podcast. In my last year of high school, when I heard all my classmates and friends talk about college, a sick, twisted feeling overcame me. I became hot and bothered, and I went home and thought, why do I feel this way? I couldn't answer myself, and only when I started to apply for a career path I had no interest in studying, law, I realized I actually didn't want to go to college or university. I wanted to pursue my passion in the film industry. But to my deep disappointment, the film industry was nothing like how I imagined. And instead, I focused all my energy and attention afterwards on art, and that's why we're here today. People and adults encouraged me to go to school. They thought it was the only way I could get a job and be successful. And I felt the complete opposite. And so did Nathaniel Drew. And it's why I was so inspired to give my artistic take on what he said. Plus, I'm in the same boat as him. People didn't understand why Nathaniel chose the path he chose. And so did I. I felt everyone's pressure around me to go to a university or college so that I could be successful and get a certificate that would have my name on, and 3 years worth of energy, or maybe even more years worth of energy, wasted on something I could have learned on my own, just more stressful and an anxious thing to think about than my current decision. This is really the way I felt. No, truly, it is. And I totally understand why everyone was concerned for me. They were concerned because it has been known back in their generation, before the age of the internet and the ability to connect with millions of people before that age, you would have to get a degree to get to where you wanted to go and do whatever you wanted to do. But instead, I decided to take the online course. I have spoken several times, and honestly, I could have chosen any platform to learn, but I chose that one, and I have no regrets. I am truly happy about that decision. And a little bit more about that is that it opened my mind and changed my mindset towards a lot of things, and I don't think I would have been able to connect with other people had I had on that course. So I don't have any regrets there. Nathaniel Drew talks about wanting to prove to the world around him that he needed to make it, and I felt that a lot. A lot of the time, I felt as if I was being judged, even when no one was saying anything. And people were going to see me as a failure because, you're automatically a failure if you haven't been to art school or college to learn. But the feeling that reassured me was endless articles of youngsters leaving uni with a degree and ranting and begging people on Twitter to help them to find a job. At least that's what happened in my country with our high unemployment rate. And unlike Nathaniel Drew in his video, I did have a backup plan. It was my career in the film industry. But as I said in the beginning of this podcast, it was nothing like how I imagined, and completely opposite to what I would have been truly interested in. So here I was, 19 years old, feeling completely lost and confused as to what I was going to do, and now becoming like him, a youngster with no backup plan. But then I spoke to a psychologist I knew who wasn't my personal psychologist, and she said there was nothing wrong with up and changing careers, and at least now I look back on what she had said, and I realized there isn't anything wrong. I wasn't going to be happy, I wasn't going to be fulfilled, doing something that didn't bring me complete joy. The problem with the film industry for me was that I was bored. I wasn't being challenged the way I wanted to. I did everything I had already done in school, and that was boring for me. I wanted more, and I couldn't seem to get it there. This challenge of art, it was definitely a perfect challenge, plus something I was already interested in since I was a child. So with that newfound confidence, I needed to get my learning. Because I wasn't that great at art, so I needed to get my learning that I was going to miss in an art school or college. But Now, did I mention that I also didn't want to go to an art school or take an art program in my area? Because I just felt it wasn't the level of knowledge I wanted to learn. Yes, maybe that was a bit cocky of me, but I did say this to somebody, an adult, and they're like, no, it's a good thing, because you're looking for more. You're looking for way beyond what we have to offer in this country, in this area, in this community, and that's totally okay, because you want to get more, and that's only going to make you a better person. So I feel better about that decision, knowing that, and I know that I'm not cocky. So as I said, where I live, there is no art program that caught my eye like the ones online, and it just made more sense to study from home, learn from home, and become a freelance. Now, looking back on this decision a year and a half or so later, I think I made a good decision. I even regret not doing this earlier. And that's the thing, is I have a lot of regrets. Why hadn't I done this earlier? Why hadn't I learned online? I think this was a great decision, and even wish I did it earlier, is one, I don't need to worry about the transport costs of going to and from a formal institute. Everything I do is online, and all I need is an internet connection, which is way cheaper than the above costs I mentioned. I'm saying above as if y'all are reading this. And, it's transcribing to you, but it's not. So, I'm always just thinking about how people write in articles. Just a little way of me thinking that way. My close high school friend is actually going to university, and I'm not saying she shouldn't, or you shouldn't, which is why I added the disclaimer in the beginning, because she needs that education, or maybe you need it, for what you or what she needs to do. If you're a medical student or want to be a teacher, you would need a formal degree as validity for employers. But for me, hearing the stress my friend has based on her assignments is probably a blessing I have that she doesn't. I do get assignments, but there's no pressure as to why I need to do them, when I need to do them. It's just that if I don't do them, I won't get my skills, and I won't learn. And then I'll just be really a failure because I didn't do all of those things. See, all of this has taught me a lot of structure and discipline. Had I gone to a physical institute, I would have most likely just spent my time following a rigid schedule set out by my school, but this has taught me how to create my own deadlines, my own disciplines, and bring myself back to work, because I consider studying work to prepare myself for the future. So I bring myself back to work when I would rather watch YouTube all day. I would rather watch anime all day. I would rather watch my favorite shows all day. Now, in Nathaniel Drew's video, he spoke about how he thought about his decision not to go to college and how it all made sense to him. But unlike him, I'm a lot more of an anxious person, and I was a lot more anxious about my decision. And if you're considering not going and are anxious too, here's what I told myself to make the feeling better. And yes, I do this a lot with myself. I have anxious feelings, and I need to look at the facts. If you ever struggle with the anxiousness of making a decision, try to do research and educate yourself. So what I did is I told myself, just because I'm not going to school to get a degree doesn't mean I'll get a job after that. And as I mentioned, in my country, it's a common thing of not getting a job after getting a degree. And ironically, Nathaniel touches deeply on that. And I also thought I could be earning an income rather than studying, because at the time, I chose not to go to a college or university when I was interested in the film industry. And when it came for my switch to art, and I was asked, did I want to go to uni or college? I already knew the answer without a doubt in my heart. No. Nathaniel also mentioned how just because he didn't go to college doesn't mean that he couldn't do all the things he wanted. It almost seems like if you can't go to college, and if you didn't go to college, you can't do the things you need to do or want to do. In actual fact, I am working on a writing project, learning a language, and learning art. Because I chose my schedule and I can prioritize whatever I want, and those three things are my priority. And honestly, I could have instead paid for a membership on a platform like Skillshare, Udemy, Masterclass, or Domestika. But I did choose the course I chose for a reason, and as I said, have no regrets. But these platforms I mentioned allow you to learn anything you want at a multitude of times. You could learn right now within 1 hour all about video editing. The next you could learn stuff about cooking, and then you could combine the knowledge of the two and make beautiful videos of you cooking. Really, it's the same thing. I'm sure with college, in my opinion, is you would have to take the courses separately on separate years. In the colleges I know around here, you can't take 2 degrees that are completely, apparently unrelated to one another to create this. So I would think this is a complete waste of time if you ask me. When we only have more or less 100 years to live, 10 which we lived out as kids, maybe 20, and another 10 to 20 in which we are unsure what our old age state will make of us, and you don't even know if you'll get to 100. So yeah, not going to college definitely gave me extra time. I feel I'd be wasting on assignments and studying art history that I know I'd probably not be interested in, when I can go learn about artists I'm actually interested in. And also writing exams, I feel like it's a waste of time, when I could create my own mini exams under my own circumstances that suit myself. With all this time, it takes a lot to learn drawing. So I wanted to document the process, and that's what this podcast is. The journey of Sanjana art and the mindset. Definitely not unique, and definitely not unique. And I say this thing for 2 reasons. It's not unique because I experience everything every artist goes through. Burnout, already experienced. Fear of putting your work out there, already experienced, which is why I took a course. Imposter syndrome, feeling like I have better art, but I don't belong because my art wasn't that great about 6, 7, 8 months ago. But, you all relate to these, but I'm giving you my experience on them. I also live a completely different life to you. I live in a different home to you. I live in a different area, community, and country to you, maybe. With different people, too. So this unique and not so unique journey is what I want to share, where my not uniqueness meets my uniqueness, so I can bring you something new. Now, Nathaniel goes on to give in his pros and cons. I didn't really give you pros and cons at the beginning of this podcast because I just wanted to share my general thoughts on why I didn't go to art school, why I don't regret it, what I'm currently doing, and what you could possibly do if you're not going to art school, and how you're gonna, get a schedule and all of that. So let's go into a little bit of my pros and cons. The cons. Number 1, probably not having this nostalgic feeling of looking back on my school years after I graduate. Yeah, maybe when I'm like 30, I'd love to hear and think about back when I was young and in college and had friends and did things. It's basically a nostalgia I'll never experience and never have, except see it in movies and TV shows. And I guess that's totally okay. And also probably not having to test my nerdy planning method. Although I get to do that now, and it's quite different to what I imagined. This is probably a silly con, but to me, I love planning, and I had ways I wanted to plan for school. Although I'm already doing that, just all digitally rather than physically on a piece of paper. And number 3, it's really just a stupid one, but having to do household chores, which I could have skipped out on if I went to college because I wouldn't have been at home. But it's really such a small thing and really a great preparation for a full life of freelancing, and at least that's my initial pursuit, freelancing. And a con I never thought of would have been a con is wanting days outside, just enjoying the sun. Just a day with events, and that would have probably happened in a college life basis. And if you are thinking of going to a formal education, then I suggest the following. And that is once a week to go to a park, spend some time outside of your home, in which you are not studying or freelancing from. You definitely need a change of scenery because it can become boring and you can live with a lot of stagnant energy, which also caused my burnout because I wasn't even spending enough time with my family. I just was drawing all the time and kept my progress pretty stagnant, if you tell me, because I just didn't see the outside world. A lot of that changed though with journaling, with me choosing to go outside more, choosing to play with my pets and annoy them, choosing to watch more anime, and choosing to spend time with my family and not get anxious over times when my family wanted to go somewhere or do something, because I knew that that would be good for my energy and my flow. So now on to the pros. Now a lot of these pros are going to deal with money because to me personally, money is scarce, and I see no point in not focusing on this in my pros. So, number 1, I saved money on lunches, transport, textbooks I probably wouldn't need after. As I mentioned, transport and lunches are probably the most important thing I would be spending my money on, and I don't need to do that. All that money is basically saved. I know someone right now who spends enough to have groceries for a weekend in a week for transport. So, yeah, I think that is a big difference, the fact that you don't need to do that. And number 2, no debt. Nathaniel Drew mentioned this too, but one of the biggest reasons why I also didn't go is because I hated the idea of owing someone after I was done studying. Maybe this is a little cocky, but also it's really just came out of anxiety. I don't like owing someone something. I don't like not having to do something because I don't have the means to, which is basically debt. I can't pay for something, so I'm taking out a loan so I can pay for it, and that's going to give me anxiety. I don't do very well with anxious thoughts, anxiousness. I don't do very well with anxious thoughts, anxiousness. It just throws me off path, and so that thought kept me anxious for a pretty long time. My decision lied on that factor, and getting rid of that, I would hate that a portion of my income was going towards debt. And now that I didn't take out a loan and I don't have any debts, I can earn income and pay for things I need without worrying. Number 3, I don't have to interact with people who I may not want to. Now trust me, I do have friends, and I'm not saying I don't like interacting with people. I'm just a lot introverted, like a lot of artists. And I made a lot of friends on Discord, and to me, if I'm having an off day or week, I don't need to speak to people. And they totally understand because we're all doing something similar, learning online. And I think this is a better way to actually connect with other people too. Had I gone to an art school or college, I would have made friends who lived within areas I know about, who live in similar backgrounds to me because we live in the same area. But because I'm on Discord and I'm meeting people, my first friend on Discord was someone from Mexico. I don't know much about her background or her culture, but I know she's from Mexico. I met someone who is from another place in Africa. I met someone from my own country who actually had the same mindset as me, which was surprising to me. I met people from all sorts, all around the world, and I think the fact that the internet connects us to another human being with just the click of a button, I mean, it blows my mind, the fact that I can connect to an artist in Canada or in India or in Japan. It blows my mind that I'm that close to that person, that close to that country, just through internet connection. And I wouldn't have had that had I gone to school, because I would have been too busy with school to have tried to socialize online. I mean, I'm not saying I couldn't have, but, your time is very, very limited. And number 4, I get to stay in the comfort of my home and have a schedule that is completely my own and works for me. I don't need to wake up early, but I wake up early, and I get to choose what I do with that time. Rather than worrying about bathing and getting ready for school, I can use that time to grow my network online, to meet other people, to look at other artists' work and get inspired, or just to look over critique from the day before that I've sent to my study buddies. Basically, I get to spend my days however I want. I get to take 1-hour lunches and breakfasts, and I know that not everybody gets that type of time on their hands to take time to enjoy their meal for an hour. But I'm unemployed in my country, and I instead of looking at this as a negative, I look at it as a positive, as a way to teach myself to be a little less spendy, and also to learn how to get structure and to learn a little bit more about the world when you don't have an income and you don't have money and all you have is your voice to share and your art to share. And to finally realize that, I mentioned in my other podcast, totally unscripted as I had said, that money made me anxious, and not the receiving of it, but the thinking of getting it. And I think that was something with the whole thing about a degree that would have probably made me very anxious. Like, within my last year, I would have been very anxious, like, oh my god, I got this degree, now I need to go look for a job. How do I do that? How do I talk to employers? We weren't taught that in school. And I get taught that online just by listening to podcasts when I'm doing my art warm-ups every single day. So, for me, that is something that was really vital and important, is just spending my time correctly. And I'm not saying when I take my 1-hour lunches that they do end up being 1 hour. I just like to eat mindfully. And also in that time, I'm watching videos on YouTube, videos on how to grow your account, videos about other artists, really just immersing myself. Had I been in art school, I would have to rush my lunch or be worried about trying to socialize with people because I wouldn't want to come off as rude. So, I felt like I've become more of myself through learning online at home at the comfort of my own space and time. And lastly, I get to have me days and sick days off if I really want to. I'm a female and there are days in which period pains take me over the edge. Had I gone to college or uni, I would have had to suck it up as if my uterus wasn't crying out in a poorly conditioned room where you being lectured, where I could not lie down from the agony. And yes, I do understand there are girls that go through this and maybe don't even be able to afford pads, and that the world doesn't give them the space to endure that pain in peace. And I feel for you, because I do still try to push myself on those days, because I understand that I may need to in the future worry about deadlines and I can't be slacking on those days. But I can choose to what limit I want to push myself, and you can't if you're going to college or university, and I really feel for you. Also, a pro and a con for me would be work. On one hand, you need to build skills so you can get a job, so you can start earning a living. On the other hand, art takes a lot of time, and I'm not at the skill level to do that. But as I was writing this script on the 18th of August 2022, TZ in his Discord server created a 16-day commission challenge for free where he taught artists how to get commissions in 16 days. And there were people of all skill levels, so maybe it isn't so hopeless for me to try, and I just have to throw myself into it. You never know, people may even buy your art, even when you don't think it's at the skill level you thought it was. It goes back onto my episode of accepting praise for your art. Like, when I posted a piece online, I did get positive comments, so I should most likely go and throw myself into the deep end and do it. So the other pro to this is that during my drawing warm-ups, I would listen to podcasts and interviews from industry pros and anything art-related podcast. And I learned a lot about the artwork industry, and I never would have found all these podcasts had I not been online amongst others learning like me. And also in these podcasts and interviews, I'd hear of big companies like Blizzard and Riot hiring artists who don't have a degree and just had great skills. And skills is more valuable than any piece of paper. Saying you have art worthy of the art industry. And Nathaniel mentions that the real world is not a classroom, and at some point you would need to learn how the art industry works. And I feel educating myself whilst doing art education really helped with that. But the con for me is when I first started